Hello, everyone. It's a little after 6, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Camila Fischthaler. I am the Conservation, Water Quality, and Outreach Intern for the Audubon Naturalist Society. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to learn about DC's water quality monitoring program. We hope that you'll find it interesting, and we'll see you out there. So this program is run by, this program is funded by the District Department of Energy and Environment. However, we do have staff from the Audubon Naturalist Society, Anacostia Riverkeeper, Rock Creek Conservancy, and Potomac Riverkeeper, and we all have a role in running this program. So before we get started, I'd like to go over a few things. First off, we're happy that you're here. This is going to be a recorded webinar, so if you want to rewatch anything, you'll be able to do so. We'll post it up on the Audubon Naturalist Society's YouTube channel. However, so we do have a question and answer session, so please hold your questions until the end. If you do want to post a question as we go through, please use the Q&A little icon here. Also, please feel free to use the chat box as we go through. Other than myself, we have a few other speakers. They are Robbi ODonnell, Dean Nalyux, and Maya Hall. I'll have them introduce themselves and their organization. So we're going to first start off with Robbi.
Hey everyone, my name is Robbi ODonnell. I'm the Watershed Program Manager with Anacostia Riverkeeper. Anacostia Riverkeeper is the kind of overarching program manager for this, getting help in respective watersheds from ANS, Potomac Riverkeeper, Rock Creek Conservancy, and everything. But here at Anacostia Riverkeeper, I'm sure Dean will say very similar stuff about Potomac Riverkeeper. But we kind of, our main tenets are to protect and restore and connect those in the Anacostia Riverkeeper or on the Anacostia River. This program we see as kind of a pretty vital aspect of all three. If you were to think of a Venn diagram, it kind of falls right in the middle. We see it as protecting, providing transparent data, water quality data to anyone in the DC metro area. It helps restore the river, or at least promote restoration of the river. And more importantly, it connects you all to the river, it connects people to the river. A river is nothing without the people who enjoy it. And so that's what's kind of really important for us. So we have a bunch of other programs that we can talk about and you can check out later. But that's us. Camille, you can go to the next slide. I don't know if we have another one.
Okay, now we're going to have Dean talk about the Potomac Riverkeeper.
Yeah, Dean Nalyux, Potomac Riverkeeper, work for Potomac Riverkeeper Network. We have 3 riverkeepers in the Potomac watershed, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But the work we do a lot of work on Clean Water Act enforcement, just working to protect and defend our nation's river, protect water quality for over 5 million people who depend on it for drinking water supply. And, you know, the Potomac is the lifeblood of the region. We use a lot of tools in our efforts to protect the river. And so this is one of our programs that we're partnering with a lot of the other groups that are on the call here tonight. So thank you for coming out. Yeah, so, you know, like I said, this is our mission. You know, obviously our goal is clean water, a healthy, safe, clean Potomac River for future generations, and promoting recreation and, you know, using this resource in a variety of ways. Hundreds of thousands of people use this for recreation. Next slide. And, you know, like I said, one of the things that we do a lot of, you know, we do protect and defend, we do a lot of patrols and enforcement, and we leverage about $1.5 to $2 million a year in pro bono legal service and enforcement actions to hold polluters accountable and cleaning up our nation's waterways and working basically to eliminate sources of pollution. Next slide.
And now Maya's going to talk to us about Rock Creek Conservancy.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Maya Hall, and I am the volunteer and as of December, Community Engagement Coordinator for Rockford Conservancy. I will go into a little bit more depth into kind of the bread and butter behind Rock Creek Conservancy a little bit later, but I do want to just say that our mission is to restore Rock Creek and its parklands as a natural oasis for all people to appreciate and protect. And I really like that Dean mentioned kind of using, like, having this as one of our tools. And so I also kind of view this project and this program and these partnerships as just a few tools in our tool belt for trying to protect and restore Rock Creek. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for having me.
And as I mentioned before, I am the intern for the Audubon Naturalist Society. ANS is the oldest independent environmental organization in the Washington, D.C. region. We work to inspire residents to appreciate, understand, and protect their natural environment through outdoor education, experience, and advocacy. We hope to create a larger and more diverse community of people who treasure the natural world and work to preserve it. So now that we've finished our introductions, this is kind of how the presentation is going to play out. First, we're going to go over what a watershed is. Then we'll talk about DC's major watersheds and how DC's sewer systems impact them. Then we'll go over how the volunteer program works, the training, the data collection process, and the lab that tests and processes these samples and data. And then finally, how the data is used, and then we'll end with our question and answer section. So this might be review for some folks, but it's always good to review. A watershed is also kind of known as a drainage basin, or it's any area that collects and drains into a common outlet. This includes surface runoff from rain and other forms of precipitation, flow from streams or rivers, as well as groundwater. So the land area kind of acts like a funnel for all of the collected water, and it kind of directs it into a single outlet. Each watershed is separated topographically by some tall geological feature that acts like a barrier. So think of like a hill, a ridge, or a mountain. So it is important to consider our local watersheds because what enters the watershed at any point can impact others as it travels downstream. Everything we do to the land has potential to impact everyone, whether or not it's a construction project or installing green infrastructure. It doesn't have to be necessarily bad, it can also be good things that we do. DC contributes to 3 major watersheds. They are the Potomac, the Anacostia, and the Rock Creek watersheds. So now I'm gonna pass it along to Robbi, who's gonna talk to us about the Anacostia watershed.
All right, the Anacostia watershed, a lovely, beautiful watershed, if I do say so myself. So the Anacostia, pretty much the whole watershed there, you can see it's a little bit in DC and then parts of Montgomery County and Prince George's County. We used to be called the eastern branch of the Potomac because we are a Potomac tributary, kind of like the Shenandoah is. We're a relatively large one, but relatively small in terms of our watershed size. We're only 176 square miles. So about 1/6 of that is in DC and 5/6 or so is up in Maryland and Prince George's County, Montgomery County. But we are heavily urbanized. So I think like 75% of the Anacostia watershed has been deemed urbanized or developed. So we are a relatively urban watershed, along with parts of the Potomac and Rock Creek, like we hear about. There's around 1 million people and growing in the Anacostia watershed. And we serve a whole host and a pretty diverse group of community members, river stewards, and stuff like that. We have a lot of people moving into our watershed each year. So we have a lot of different problems that are very similar to Rock Creek and the Potomac. Stormwater, sediment, toxics, things like this, and just sewage and pollutants getting into the river. And so kind of the main point of this program, and what we'll talk about a little bit later, it's just kind of checking up on recreational water quality, which we have a little bit more on the Anacostia. We have some in the upper parts of the Anacostia through a different program. And then we have some on the main stem here with this DC program, in which we have 7 sites here. The first one is almost at the top of the DC Maryland border there at the National Arboretum, almost at the Route 50 bridge there in DC. And then as you go all the way down, we have another 6 moving from some tributaries, and then all the way down to like Washington Channel area. or where the new wharf development is, kind of right there by the recreational dock where there's kayaks and stuff like that. So those are our 7 sites on the Anacostia. They will have varying water quality, which I'll talk about a little bit later. That's our beautiful watershed and a nice little snapshot.
Great. And now Dean's going to talk to us about the Potomac watershed.
Yeah, so the Potomac, if you can go back to the last slide, the Potomac River Basin is over 14,700 square miles. And this is why we have 3 river keepers. This is a really big watershed and drains. And there's a lot of it's agricultural runoff. And we have a lot of timber areas, and, the real urban areas obviously are right around this DC region, the counties surrounding it. But other than that, there's a lot of rural areas. We have, like I said, a lot of pollution issues that are in the Chesapeake Bay, nutrients and sediments, phosphorus, nitrogen are all, a lot of it's coming from agricultural runoff way far upstream. Obviously, urban stormwater pollution is a big issue. I'm sure we're going to be covering that a lot more here. But, and as a whole, this is one of the larger tributaries flowing into the entire Chesapeake Bay, other than the Susquehanna River. So that's the Potomac watershed in a nutshell. And so, I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of our work. We do a lot of river patrols. Go to the next slide. We do a lot of aerial flyovers. We conduct our own investigations. This is Dominion's Possum Point coal ash. This is a 92 feet deep coal ash pond that was leaking about 5 million tons of toxic ash into Quantico Creek in the Potomac River. And we recently worked to pass legislation in Virginia to clean up 28 million tons of toxic coal ash on the Virginia side. Next slide. And then on the Maryland side, we do a lot of work as well. And this was further downriver, Morgantown coal-fired power plant. We strengthened their permit to eliminate selenium, mercury, arsenic, one of the strongest permits for coal-fired power plants in the country. And so this is the kind of work that we do on a regular basis in terms of finding sources of pollution, like this illegal discharge you see here on the photo that we found on an aerial flyover, and then start conducting our own investigations and work to eliminate those sources of pollution. And so we do it throughout the entire watershed, but obviously we're based here in DC at Georgetown. Next slide. And we recently launched a Swimmable Potomac campaign. I'm sure maybe Robbi will talk about it, but it is illegal to swim in the Potomac River here in the DC area. And next slide. And at one time it wasn't illegal to swim, even though these skirts right here were illegal at the time probably. But, and under the Clean Water Act, I think it's important to realize that the entire premise of the Clean Water Act is based on this idea that we have these designated uses like swimming, fishing, drinking water supply, and we're supposed to protect water quality so that it continues, those uses are continued. And so, there's a lot of people that use this river for recreation. There's literally tens of thousands of people in the summer that are on this river. And we're trying to make sure that this river remains swimmable for future generations as well. Next slide. And so, we talked about the partnership with other groups in the water quality monitoring, the citizen science program. But so that's one of the goals in terms of monitoring water quality for bacteria. We want to repeal the swimming ban in DC because we feel the public has a right to use its river. This is one of the few cities in the entire country that has made swimming illegal based on sewage pollution in its waterways. We passed legislation in 2017 and requiring Alexandria to fix its combined sewer system. So our goals here in at least the DC area are to fix these combined sewer systems and eliminate these massive sources of nutrients and pollution and bacteria that are entering our waterways and make swimming safe again. And we feel that that's totally doable by 2030. Next slide. And so, just wrapping up, like I mentioned, we had passed legislation to require Alexandria to fix its combined sewer system. In 2019, we got a court order requiring DC to redevelop its TMDL for bacteria, basically the pollution diet for the river. That was a lawsuit with Anacostia Riverkeeper. And now DOE is proposing to basically weaken water quality standards and allow this designated wet weather use that we have real concerns about. And so I'm just using this as an example of the work that we do. We're just there's constant vigilance required when you are a riverkeeper program, to make sure that we're enforcing these laws and that polluters are staying in compliance with those laws. So I'll wrap it up there. I think that's the last slide in my section. And basically, like I said, making the river swimmable again. And this is like a major goal of the organization. And I think everybody that's involved in this program. So thank you.
And now we're going to have Maya talk to us about the Rock Creek watershed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. All right. So as I mentioned in my introduction, the mission of Rockford Conservancy is to truly restore Rock Creek and its parklands as a natural oasis. And I think that something that is really, really important that I want to mention here is that we want to restore it as a natural oasis, and we have that particular focus on being an oasis for all people to appreciate and protect. And I think that ties in really nicely with what what Dean said and what Robbi said about making this water safe for all. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. But I do want to kind of point out the map right here in the sort of center of my slide. This is an image of the Rock Creek watershed, my favorite watershed, but of course I'm not biased. And Rock Creek itself, the main stem is approximately 33 miles in length. It starts all the way up in Laytonsville, Maryland, travels all the way through Montgomery County, enters the DC border where the land does become a national park, and then finally flows and meets the Potomac River down in Georgetown. The surrounding area, the surrounding parkland, we've got approximately 80 square miles of the watershed that we do work to protect and restore. And since 2005, the Conservancy has engaged more than 40,000 Rock Creek stewards in people-powered restoration, which I think is really, really phenomenal. I really think that focusing on using our community, building our community to get this important work done, as I'm sure some of you wonderful volunteers and bacteria monitors have done, is critical to restoring our waterways. Next slide, please. And so kind of the main why behind why we're all here, Rock Creek Conservancy has a major focus on one of the major threats to the Rock Creek watershed, which is stormwater runoff and pollution. You can see the slide, or the image on the left-hand side of this slide is a normal day, and the image on the right-hand side is a major flash flood event after a rainstorm. The geography of Rock Creek, particularly directly next to the creek, is kind of formed so that you do experience quite a bit of flashiness, but that coupled with a lot of increase in stormwater from our combined sewer overflow systems and our stormwater outfalls really, really exacerbates the issue. And that's something that we're trying to tackle. Next slide, please. So just a quick summary of some of the information from our end. So we also tackled 8 sites, and hopefully you've all read the report. It's a fantastic report, but just as a quick summary, throughout the summer, our monitors found that the Rock Creek water had higher bacteria counts than Anacostia. And that is something that we, as an organization, really, really want to address and want to try and focus on mitigating in the future. And you can kind of see that we've got a lot of, so we've got a nice kind of cross section of Montgomery County and kind of the top of DC, but we've got quite a bit of red going through there, which is not good. Next slide, please. And another kind of just why should it matter? Why are we here? Why do we care? And I'm here to tell you that, number one, let's care and let's do this work, and kind of why we, the Conservancy, also want to engage in this program, in this project, do it for the wildlife. DC has one endangered species. It's this adorable little amphipod, the hay spring amphipod, super cuddly, right? But it's not just about this super cute little creature. It's also the plants and the birds and the mammals and the reptiles and the amphibians. We've got a ton of wildlife that does rely on having clean and safe water. Next slide, please. And then I think the why that kind of hits closest to home for all of us, we want to restore and participate in programs like this for the people. We also have a nice kind of old-timey, if you will, photo to share. And swimming in Rock Creek didn't used to be illegal as well. And I think a really big part of trying to get Rock Creek to be fishable and swimmable is supporting programs like this and engaging volunteers in this really important stormwater pollution, stormwater runoff education, and volunteering. And so one of our goals with the Rock Creek watershed is to also have something, not a return to what you're seeing here, but to have a forward motion in terms of getting us some healthy water. We don't want the bacteria to harm people. All right, next slide, please. And so because of this particular year, all of us have had a very unique year, I am sure, but we partnered with National Park Service to do a sign campaign to try and stop some of the visitor usage of with the creek. So we were seeing a lot higher incidence of water usage, water interactions, and so we're really trying to, in the nicest way possible, keep people safe and keep people from interacting with that water that has such high bacteria levels that is unsafe. Next slide, please. Okay, and my final point is there are something that I'm particularly proud of is in addition to volunteering with a program like this, so going out and becoming a monitor, which is super duper fun, we also are encouraging people to act as stewards individually. So to pick up trash, to reduce points of pollution that will enter the Rock Creek watershed, that will then eventually enter the Potomac and potentially the Anacostia, and then the greater Chesapeake watershed. So we're really encouraging individual cleanups and other pollution mitigation techniques. So if I could talk about it all day, but I won't take up too much time. But if anybody wants to talk about volunteering or anything Rock Creek stormwater runoff related, you can always reach out to me. Next slide, please. I've put my information here, but you can also chat in the chat box to me. But I can always talk about Rock Creek, the watershed, and how to make it a place that is truly restored and truly for all people. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So as you heard, surface runoff and human infrastructure can have a significant impact on water quality, especially our sewer systems. So in DC, we have two types of sewer systems. And you heard about the combined sewer system, but we also have the separate sewer system. The red area on this map of DC is the land area that contributes to a combined sewer system. It accounts for about 1/3 of DC's land area, with the remaining 2/3 contributing to a separate sewer system. So we're throwing around these terms around like a combined sewer or a separate sewer. So like, what do we actually mean when we say that? Well, a separate sewer system is probably what you guys think or expect what our sewer systems are like. It has two pipes. One pipe that carries stormwater runoff from road drains to outfalls, and that dumps into local creeks and streams. This water is not treated, so if there is trash or any pollution, that means like fertilizer from like golf courses or homes, or like road salt, that is actually just going straight into our local water. The second pipe carries sanitary sewage from homes and businesses, and it'll take that straight to a wastewater treatment facility. The combined sewer, unfortunately, is a little bit different. It's a little bit older. It only has one pipe, which means that it's connected to both stormwater and sanitary sewage. So in dry weather, this isn't a problem. It'll send sewage and wastewater to a treatment facility, no problem. However, when it rains, the system can be overloaded and it can reach overcapacity pretty quick with the addition of stormwater. So in order to prevent sewage from backing up into people's homes and businesses, the combined sewer will discharge untreated water into local rivers, creeks, and streams. So I do know that you guys are probably wondering what this might look like. Luckily for you, we do have a video from Robbi, so let's check it out.
So here we have a combined sewage overflow. All this murky water here, overflowing from our combined sewage overflow point right here. Red light means there's currently an overflow happening right now. So with overflows, you get all this nice brown sewage water, you get some trash, you get some more trash. Basically everything that's on the streets and in your homes ends up here. You get some cabbage.
Yeah, so it's a little bit gross. There are more than one combined sewer outfall along DC. There's actually several. So we know that untreated water is entering our waterways, but we do need help monitoring and collecting data. So monitoring can help us can help us become aware of current and emerging issues by giving us data necessary to make informed decisions and for water management. Thanks to volunteers, we're able to collect this data on bacteria levels, water turbidity, pH, as well as water and air temperature. This data provides up-to-date, accessible water quality information for residents and visitors to DC during our recreational season, which are our summer months. So in 2018, the District Department of Energy and Environment awarded Anacostia Riverkeeper a grant to monitor sites in all 3 major watersheds. 2019 was the first summer of monitoring, and we had over 100 volunteers, and we were able to collect over 500 samples. This year, like everyone else, we've had to adapt to health concerns due to the coronavirus. However, we were still able to get over 35 new volunteers trained virtually. So these are all the sites where we monitor. There are 22 sites in total. There are 8 along Rock Creek, there are 7 along the Potomac River, and there are also 7 along the Anacostia River. So every year we are looking for new volunteers. Anyone is welcome to join. If you are under the age of 18, we do ask that you be accompanied by an adult. Monitoring usually happens Wednesday mornings, but we do have Thursday as our backup in case there's rain and it becomes unsafe to go out. If you can't commit to both days, don't worry, just sign up for Wednesday, that's no problem. There is no minimum number of days you're required to sign up. You can sign up for as many days as you'd like, even if it is just 1. And multiple people can sign up for a site. So you can bring along a friend, or if you need like a new date idea, I think this is a great one. Also, by volunteering, you are helping scientists gather real data and help increase the chances of catching environmental changes early. So if you're passionate about your environment, this is a great way to do that. You're also learning and exploring your local water, which is great because I actually got to go into Rock Creek, places that I never went before, so that was really cool. So in order to participate, you will have to go through a brief training. Trainings are available in April, of which you only have to attend 1 to receive your DC Water Quality Citizen Scientist certificate. You do have to take a short quiz, but don't worry, it just goes over what you learn in the training session. You can always refer back to the manual if you're unsure. So monitoring is weekly from May to September. On average, I would say it probably takes folks about 20 minutes per site. Although as you become more familiar with the process of collecting the data, you'll probably finish it faster. We did have people finish within 15 minutes. Twice a week, you'll get emails from staff with sign-up reminders. These emails will include where to sign up, where to pick up or drop off samples and equipment, any safety concerns, and it'll also have a link to the training manual if you want to review it. The training manual also includes GPS coordinates and parking recommendations to monitoring sites. So you can actually just plug those right into Google Maps and you should be able to navigate to your site. So once you signed up, we'll make sure you have everything you need by giving you one of our kits. I would recommend bringing a watch or your phone because you will have to record the time at some parts during the protocol. Your kit will include a cooler, which is there so you can keep your water samples cool. You have a thermometer so you can record the air and water temperature. You'll have 2 bottles, one that is clear, and that's for the bacteria sample. This will help us gather information on E. coli and total coliform bacteria levels. You'll also have an opaque bottle, and this is what we use for our turbidity sample. So that's just letting us know how cloudy the water is. The kit also has a pH bottle, which you can see in the lower center image here. It does have pH strips, so all you have to do is dip the tip of the strip into the water for about a minute, and then you'll compare the color of the strip to one of the colors on the bottle. And this will help us determine the water's pH or acidity level. You'll also have all the data sheets that you need, labels, and we'll also give out writing utensils like pens. We'll also make sure you guys have gloves because, yeah, you don't really want to touch the water sometimes, so it's always good to have. There is some observational data that you'll also be writing down. So sometimes you'll notice that the water just seems like it's moving really fast. So that's something that we'd like to know. Sometimes the water color kind of looks off. So sometimes you might see something that's cloudy. That's something that we'd also like to know. You'll let us know what kind of weather you collected in, if you smell anything, or if you see like a dead fish in the water. Those are all stuff that we would like to know. You'll also be recording and keeping track the number of people who are contacting the water. So like Maya said, there are a lot of people this summer out in Rock Creek recreating. We saw kids swimming, we saw them playing. There are hikers that just came into contact with the water or their dogs were running through it. That is something that we'd like to know. So once you're done with all of the data sheets and collecting samples, you will drop off your samples with staff members at a predetermined location, or you'll take it to the Anacostia Riverkeeper office. So now Robbi is going to go over what they do with the samples.
Hey, yeah. I'll also include in the chat, there was actually an article that was about the report that we released that kind of goes into some of the recreation data that we saw from this year, which is pretty interesting. That's some of the data that you collect as a volunteer. And we noticed kind of this trend from 2019 to 2020 of different styles of recreation that changed, different types of recreation that changed, and then the amount of recreation that changed on each watershed. It's a little bit of a snapshot. Yes, you take the data every Wednesday morning, so it's slightly skewed. You're not going to see as much going on, say as you would Saturday morning or something like that. But it is still pretty interesting. So I included a link to that was just released at WAMU and DCist today. But yes, so the bacteria that we sample for, we use a pretty easy method, kind of similar to, kind of similar to, as you would see in like an old biology class with like the Petri dishes and the little bacteria plates and stuff like that. Same concept, just with a little twist on it. So essentially when you bring us the bottle, we'll put in what's called a reagent. So if you assume the bacteria are in that bottle, we just give them a little bit of food essentially. And that food has a special dye in it, a special chemical in it, that those bacteria will then eat essentially. We allow those bacteria to incubate. That's what you see on that picture to the top left. That's an incubator at 35 degrees Celsius for 24 hours. So the holdout time basically for results is 24 hours. We wish it was instantaneous. Unfortunately, that's the nature of science right now. So it's 24 hours until we can get a result. So we get results on Thursday morning or typically Thursday afternoon after we get the samples and can run them. So once we do all that, if you look to the picture on the top right, you'll see what's look like a tray with a bunch of little grids on it. So the sample goes into there and it's been incubated. So the water is in there in this tray system. And then we read it under a black light, like a black light. You would see it like a club or something like that. We read it under a black light. And that's what that picture at the bottom is, with the little black cabinet right there, with the binoculars looking things on it. So we looked through there, and because of that food we gave it and that special chemical in that reagent, if the bacteria eat it, they will fluoresce under black light. So it's basically as easy as you put that tray under a black light and you count how many of those larger wells, we call them, the little squares. We count how many of those are active or fluorescing, and we count how many of the smaller ones are fluorescing. And based off that count, based off that number, there's a cross cheat that comes with the whole system. It's called IDEX system. The call alert system is, if you want to get technical. And it basically, based off of thousands and thousands and thousands of runs of statistical measures of bacteria results, you get a bacteria number. And so that's basically, in a quick cut and dry version, of how we get the actual bacteria results. This is pretty simple. It can be done with minimal setup, and it can be done relatively easily. I can train someone to do this in a lab in about 5 minutes. And so it's really good for nonprofits who are doing really kind of cut and dry citizen science work on the water or anything like that, or who just want to go collect a sample really, really fast. Say if there's pollution going on or something like that, and we want to get a confirmation sample. We can go take a quick sample, and then 24 hours later, we'll have results lickety split. Well, 24 hours lickety split. So it's relatively easy, it's relatively cost effective. So it works really great for this type of work, I'll say. So there you can see one of our staff members, Olivia, she's looking into the cabinet, if you want to call it that, the reading system. And then you look down, you can see it looks in there like a little party. Those big wells are fluorescing, and then some smaller wells fluorescing. So the small wells are really indicative kind of what the result's going to be. So I can tell by looking at that sample, it's probably potentially passing, but probably failing if I had to guess. Maybe passing by like a small margin. But that's what it looks like underneath the hood, so to speak.
Yeah, so once we have the data collected and analyzed, we distribute this information out to the public, and it's free and it's accessible. You can access it by going to the Swim Guide app or the Water Reporter app, both of which are free, as well as you can go to the Anacostia Riverkeeper website. It is updated every Thursday or Friday morning, and this is just so everyone can have up-to-date information. As it was mentioned earlier, it is illegal to swim in district waters. However, you might come into contact with it, so you might want to check beforehand if you would do something like paddle boarding or kayaking, or I don't know if anyone does crew, but there are high school crews that go out, or other forms of recreation. You might want to check beforehand. The data is also used to support advocacy efforts and determine environmental compliance. So DC Water does take a look at this data. So what have we learned so far? Well, when we look back at last year's and this year's data, some sites show a noticeable increase in bacteria levels on rainy days when we compare them to dry collection days. We also saw higher than expected bacteria levels on dry days at some sites, especially in Rock Creek, I believe. They were frequently over the Environmental Protection Agency's recommendation for human contact. This might indicate that increased input from stormwater isn't our only issue. There might be some pipelines that are very old and are overdue for replacement. They might be improperly connected, leaking, or just generally degrading. So if these results interest you and you want to learn more about it, Anacostia Riverkeeper will be hosting another webinar that will go over their annual report. I've included a link to their annual report. I believe you guys should be able to click on it in this slide. Yeah. I don't know, Robbie, if you want anything else to add.
Yeah, that'll be in the next coming weeks in December. Most likely, I'll also include a link to the report in the chat there too. And just say this was done kind of as a collective effort with ANS, Rockford Conservancy, Potomac Riverkeeper, and we all kind of had our own little bits in our own watersheds. But it's pretty interesting. We go over the water quality results from this year. We compare them to last year, 2019, which we also had as kind of our baseline year. And then we also go into some of the recreation data, like I talked about, which is important and important to show. Camilla talked about using it for advocacy. We can use this for advocacy to show places like DOEE, DC Water, things like National Park Service, places like this, just how people are using their water and how the water quality was when people were using the water. And then use this to show that water quality, I mean, according to our report in the data, water quality improved from 2019 to 2020 with, I think, 9 inches more of rain in the same time period. So water quality is improving. Some of those capital improvements, those tunnels, the green infrastructure, all these types of things, they seem to be working. We're hoping to continue this in next year, the year after that, to be able to have this nice publicly available data set so we can show this stepwise and marked change and hopeful improvement, and then get to what Dean was talking about, which is hopefully inevitably lift these swim bans so we can enjoy this clean water that we have.
Great. So if you'd like to volunteer next summer, please consider signing up. You can just send an email to monitor@anacostiariverkeeper.org. You can always opt out later if you find yourself unable to participate. We know that summer 2021 is a long time from now, especially during these times. It's a little bit questionable, but we'd still love to see you out there. So thank you for joining us tonight. Now we're just going to go over any questions that you guys might have.
Camila, there's one in there that asks about, are there any opportunities to volunteer over the weekends?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, it says, someone asked, are there any opportunities to volunteer over the weekends? And everyone can talk about their respective opportunities.
Yeah, I think each nonprofit group has their own opportunities to volunteer.
So not for this program, but every group over the weekend has different stuff. I know we have cleanups and stuff like that. Dean can talk probably similar stuff. Same with ANS and Rock Creek.
Yeah, we actually have a cleanup this weekend at Bellhaven Marina if anybody's interested.
For Rockford Conservancy, we try and host a volunteer event every Saturday, and we're also kind of ramping up with some other types of events. We do trash cleanups, invasive removals. We've got some slightly more construction-based projects that involve covering bamboo lasagna style. So if anyone's interested in doing something a little bit more construction-based, we do that. And then if you're just more generally interested in kind of getting way more involved, becoming a super volunteer, you can always reach out to me. I'll just put my email in the chat, and I'd love to talk to each and every one of you.
I'll also add one thing just about the water quality report, and one of the main kind of findings that we saw. I know us and Potomac Riverkeeper Network, and I know ANS and Rock Creek as extension, always like to have this kind of 72-hour rule when recreating in the water. So if there's a big rainstorm, maybe wait 48 to 72 hours before recreating in around the water, just because these sewage overflows can happen. It's washing stuff off the streets, everything like this, into the water. And we actually saw in the report that when it had rained over 0.5 inches, sites were basically, I think, 8 sites would have passed out of the 22. And if it had rained under 0.5 inches in a 72-hour span, 14 or more sites would have passed on average. So it really shows that if we get a lot of rain in a 72-hour span, less sites are going to pass, which means a lot of the water quality is probably going to be a little murky, to use a bad pun. But we always like to kind of reiterate this 72-hour rule, and we kind of have this data now that can back it up. We always kind of assumed it, but it's nice to have this data that kind of confirms it. So that's one thing we always like to say is be careful 72 to 48 hours after it rains, like we had kind of a few days ago. Always a good rule of thumb to kind of play by.
It is. This is DNAX, Potomac Riverkeeper. Yeah, we definitely try to encourage people to stay out of the water for at least 48 hours after rain. But we just recently discovered some of the dry weather discharges that were occurring at one of the outfalls right up near Washington Canoe Club and Keybridge Boathouse, and we found out that it was actually going on throughout the summer, and people were literally swimming in sewage after these rain events when it was dry, and it prompted an investigation by EPA as well as DOE, and that's under investigation right now. So basically, Potomac Riverkeeper Network, I know Anacostia Riverkeeper, we have a hotline. If you see any type of sewage discharge, broken sewage pipes, combined sewer overflow events, and particularly during dry weather when it's not supposed to be happening, please let us know, because we just kind of uncovered a really big problem just in the past couple of weeks that was occurring all summer long, just because people weren't reporting that information to us.
And I can also answer one of the questions in there. It says, Sarah, you said, are there opportunities to volunteer in the lab, or are they only out in the field? Yeah, we do have opportunities to volunteer in the lab. I'll leave my email here. We always accept volunteers if you want to come to the lab. Sometimes they're not as prolific as our field volunteers, but if you'd like to get into the lab, we always invite our volunteers if you're dropping off samples or anything like that, in a non-COVID world mostly. But to come in and see how the lab looks, see how it runs. We'll usually have 1 or 2 people in there, staff in there at all times on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Our office is always open. So if you want to kind of explore some of the lab side of it, feel free to shoot me an email.
Also, with one of the questions asking about if we have student groups come out, I only have worked with kids individually. Their reactions kind of vary. Some kids find it they just talk about poopy water the entire time. I mean, they do find it interesting and they do enjoy going out and learning about it. So, yeah.
And it looks like there's another one in there from Thomas. Does the information collected feed into the DMV's development and revision of water quality standards? Well, we'd like it to. So we do provide the data each week to the District Office of Energy and Environment. We do provide it publicly to everyone who cares about it, but we do send it directly to the Water Quality Division at DOEE, which theoretically should help sway some of that stuff. But as Dean talked about, we're still currently kind of in a little bit of a fight over some bacteria TMDLs and stuff like that. So it's a mixed picture, so to say. But we do supply that data to DC government and hope that it is used for actions like that.
I know I'm a panelist, but can I ask a follow-up question to that? Kind of relate, well, not panelist, but I know I'm a speaker. In a perfect world, since I see kind of my role is mostly I'm a facilitator of wonderful volunteer work, and I'm not so much on the data collection and analysis side of things. But in a perfect world, how many years do you think that it would take before we can see some direct policy changes or other development and standard changes in the DMV? I know it's a tricky question.
I can answer for the Anacostia, and I mean the Anacostia and the Potomac and the Rock Creek will all be slightly different, and Dean may have a different opinion. I know on the Anacostia, we talked about swimming being illegal. It was permitted on the Potomac starting a few years back. I think Dean, you probably have that date. But last year, the permitting just got extended to the Anacostia. So that's a really small uptick. I mean, it's not a huge win, but hey, it's a win nevertheless. As you can see in the report, the water quality in the Anacostia and the Potomac and Rock Creek are all different. So it's tough to say, oh yeah, swimming is legal everywhere in DC, flip the switch and everyone jump in, because they're all unique in their own ways. But yeah, I mean, we see small incremental change. We would like to see it sooner rather than later, so to speak. But all we can really do is keep the government's feet to the fire, so to speak. Dean, do you have a question on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, the tunnel on the Anacostia was completed in 2018, and it's captured well over 10 billion gallons of combined sewage and stormwater, probably upwards of 15 at this point. The Potomac Tunnel is still 10 years away though. So, you know, you have this, I think, a kind of a conundrum for DC. Like, I think, you know, probably you could start moving toward swimmability in the Anacostia with, to some degree. Potomac, obviously, based on our data, there's certainly periods of time when it's safe to swim. And that's why we do the swim guide so people know when it's safe to go on the river. But with the combined sewer overflows that are going to continue with DC till 2030 on the Potomac and 2025 in Alexandria, there's just a lot of sewage just being discharged in our waters during rain events. And then when you have these smaller tribs like Rock Creek, and then even some of the smaller tribs that we sample, which have high bacteria levels frequently, it's a challenge for DC. There's a lot of interest in this. I know, like, over the Georgetown bid wants to put in swimming lanes because they're hearing about what's happening over the Anacostia. They're talking about, I guess, some rafts where people can swim and stuff like that. But I mean, so I think it's a challenge for DC to figure out. I mean, to me, the bottom line is there is no other city that I'm aware of in this country that has made it illegal for swimming. And so what other cities do is they have notification that allows people to know when there are these sewage events. And I think we need a better notification system other than the lighting system that Robbie's video pointed out earlier, and just better public awareness. And, you know, so obviously our goal would be to lift it sooner rather than later and just give people back the right to swim. Obviously, we want people to do it with the knowledge and understanding when it is safe to go in the river.
Thank you both for answering that. I ask because I try to be patient, and I know that personally, and also I'm sure organizationally, we'd love to see changes like that. But I try to remind myself that you just have to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work to get it done. So thank you for sharing, both of you.
Also, to answer that last question that asked if the data is available in like a raw format for mapping projects, if you shoot me an email, I can work on getting you with that data. So we don't have an Excel sheet like on our website, just due to data use stuff. But if you reach out to me personally, I can work with you to get that data. Ask all the questions people have. Got like 4, 5, 10 minutes.
There's some questions that say, where will this recording and all associated links and emails be shared? I think you mentioned it at the beginning, Camilla, but someone did ask that.
Yeah, so this recording will be on the Audubon Naturalist Society's YouTube page. Well, it should also be available on the, so Eliza just posted it onto the group chat.
It also asks, do other cities have combined sewage systems like DC's? Yes, many of them. Basically, any city that was built before 1920, basically, or even then, or later than that. Richmond has, Baltimore, like every city has had combined sewage to some degree or the other. So question, how often do the CSOs overflow? It depends. It all depends on the amount of rain, where the rain's falling, where the rain's flowing. That video that y'all saw, that was from last that July 8th or 9th storm. I forget when that was, when like you saw those pictures of the flooding on Canal Road and all that stuff. That was from that storm. I was in the office at the time and made it in before the flooding happened. And so I was able to go, that was at Navy Yard. I was able to go down there and see the light on there. But there's different amount of CSOs on each water body. I forget how many are on each. It's in the report. Dean probably has the Potomac number. Anacostia is like 15 or something, and Rock Creek's like 20 to 25-ish, maybe. So it all depends on the rain, where it's falling, all that stuff. But the tunnels that were talked about on the Anacostia, at least, and hopefully once they're installed on the Potomac and then Rock Creek, if they follow through with that Rock Creek tunnel, will hopefully limit those CSOs, and that's the whole goal.
Yeah, I mean, on average, and like you said, everyone's different, but 40 to 60 times a year, you know, I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of rain to trigger CSOs, and some of them discharge more frequently than others. The EPA, the consent decree, the requirements under EPA is to try and get these down to about 4 to 6 per year. So this is why we're pushing for this. So once we get the tunnels put in and the combined sewer system, the long-term control plan completely completed, we should only have about 4 to 6 of these events per year, hopefully.
And they did the same project, they call it the big one on the Willamette River in Portland, I think, where it was a very similar situation. And they had like 40 to 60 CSOs, and they got it down, I think, to like 3 to 4 a year, maybe within like 3 years of the tunnel actually being online. And people are like swimming in the Willamette River now and stuff like that. So that's hopefully what we're going to get. And no, that wasn't at that CSO visit wasn't at Fort McNair. It was just upstream, actually right next to Nats Park, where the new DC water building is, the O Street Pump House. It was like that CSO right there, where that little pedestrian bridge is that goes over the water right there. That one's relatively a larger one of the CSOs on the Anacostia, but that one was just happened to be flowing pretty hard that day. Perfect timing, 7 o'clock.
I think we have one more question. The Anacostia Tunnel. Robbi, I don't know if you want to answer that one.
Yeah, I'll go fast, then let Dean answer the other question. The tunnels basically serve as large, I like to call them large storage tanks. They're 9 feet in diameter and basically serve as a overflow holding tank in a way. For that overflow. So instead of otherwise ending up in the Anacostia, the Potomac, or Rock Creek, on the Anacostia right now specifically, they flow into those tunnels where they can then sit there. Basically, it prevents the system from getting overloaded. So it can sit there and then be piped down to Blue Plains, the wastewater treatment facility, where it can then get treated. In the first year of its construction, the Anacostia Tunnel captured, I think, 4.2 billion gallons of overflow. In its first year. So that's kind of the same idea that's going to be applied to the ones in the Potomac and Rock Creek, and then I think the ones that are happening in Alexandria as well. But Dean, do you want to answer the coal ash one?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
In that coal ash overhead picture, is the coal ash pond that's leaking or just improper dumping? So is it leaking or is it dumping, or both?
I mean, basically there's coal ash ponds all over the country. The EPA put in federal CCR rules for cleaning up coal ash ponds, and the rules are pretty weak. They're delegated down to the states, but the bottom line is every major coal-fired power plant at one time probably had a coal ash pond. Some states started phasing them out, like Maryland a while ago. States like Virginia allowed them to continue because Dominion Power is very powerful. I dealt with them in North Carolina under Duke Energy. And so now we're very thankful we've been able to get legislation passed in 2019 to clean up all 28 million tons of Dominion's coal ash. But we're one of the few states in Virginia that's actually requiring all of its coal ash ponds to be cleaned up. But yeah, that's where they would dump all the soot and ash coming out of the smokestacks that were being captured into these ash ponds. So these were waste disposal systems that were basically 13th century technology with no lining system at all. And that's why they're just a serious health hazard with tons of heavy metals in them. They just need to go. Super dangerous. They should have been eliminated decades ago.
All right, everyone. So we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you all for coming. If you do have more questions, feel free to contact us. Yeah, thank you all.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Y'all have a
Thanks,
good-
everyone.
Thank you all.